I'll sit here. You guys sit wherever. It'll be casual. It'll be good. I'm Sarah Kunst, and everybody else is going to introduce themselves. I have my phone because that's where I put my notes because I'm a millennial who works in tech and I don't have note cards. But I turned it on airplane mode, so you can't text me while I'm up here. I mean, you can. I'll get it later. But we're just going to kind of jump right in because we only have 40 minutes, and these women are incredible. And I want you to hear what they have to say. So we're going to talk about, we all run companies, and some days that's a really awesome thing, and other days it's like head in the oven type of thing. So we're going to talk about that. So let's do a really quick poll, and then we're going to jump in with introductions. How many of you guys are thinking about at some point starting a company? Ooh. A lot. And how many of you currently work in like a startup or have worked, invested, advised on anything with startups? Cool. And how many of you did stuff with startups and now you're like, hell no? I see one hand, I appreciate that. So in lieu of introductions, we're just gonna kind of jump in, talking about how in the world do you start. And so we're gonna start over here and work our way back around. And so ladies just say, hey, this is my name and this is my company and here's how I ended up starting it.
Cool. I'm Tracy Lawrence. I'm the CEO of a company called Choose. I actually started it here at USC. So it's funny walking around and being like, oh yeah, that's where I hosted the first food truck event, which was on the Row. And then, oh, this is where we hosted a Taste of Downtown LA on McCarthy Quad. So I Choose, basically what we do is we deliver family style meals to offices. So we work with office managers who are like totally overwhelmed. They want to order food for their teams. We have a complete website solution for it. And we offer curated menus, and it's just like delicious food. We work with about 150 restaurants in San Francisco and LA. So how I started it was I was an event planner here. So I was working on TEDx USC. And from there, it was the USC Stevens Center. They asked me, they said, hey, can you just do this all hands for us? It's 30 people. And I was a student, I was a junior, or maybe I was a sophomore. And I was like, sure, this will be easy. And it was a total nightmare. We ended up she was like, we have to order from Subway usually. I was like, we're not doing Subway. We're not going to do it. So, but then as I start talking to restaurants, they're like, well, it's just going to be, it's not within budget. We can't meet the delivery needs. And so we ended up working with Vistango right down the road. And what I started to do is I went to restaurants and I said, hey, if you give me a commission, can I set you up with some orders from student organizations? And they were like, sure, why not? And I was like, how about 8%? They're like, all right, let's do it. So I made it up. I did a Word document template, and I bought an e-fax line for $10 a month. And I just started transacting orders, and that's how I started. And for me, it was like not putting it on a pedestal of like, oh my God, I'm starting something big. It was just like spending, an outlay of like $10 a month, literally, to get it started.
Yeah, that's great. My name is Angela Sutherland. I started a company called Yumi. We deliver baby food, so like direct-to-consumer, fresh baby food. My story is a little different because I was in finance, like deep finance, for much of my life. I was an investment banker and then private equity. And so I was really never thinking of like a full startup role, let alone like a mother job or like a. But when you get into the mom space, you realize like how broken it is, like how very little things that like you're supposed to like as a millennial, or things you like think you're gonna encounter when you get there are like not there. And so it was like sort of this confluence of me realizing how few things were not really available to a parent, plus the fact that like there really should be like the real market size for that I thought like this needs to exist, so. Not to like really beat it over the head, but like baby food options are really limited. It's like things from a long time ago. So Gerber squeeze pouches that are shelf stable and stuff that you don't want to eat. And the other options, you cook every meal. But I was a working mom. Like I worked 80-hour weeks. I was in private equity. And like the idea of me cooking every single meal was just like off the table, literally. But like, so I thought like that has to exist, right? I can Postmate or order any other food, but I can't get baby food. Babies need very specific things. So that's really all started. I mean, how it started was actually a bigger leap for me because I had to leave my job. So I was really like do I want to leave my cush life and do something else? But I think, in the same way, you just have to be scrappy about it. So you have to decide, like, what are the little things that get you there, So for me, it was finding a co-founder, really, like, doing the business plan, going over it and deciding, like, what are the moves? Like how do you do this? How much money will it take to get off the ground? And then once you do that, you realize it's actually not as hard as you think it is. Like, once you actually put the pieces in, you're like, we could do this. We could actually make that happen. And then we, raised a little friends and family, and then ended up raising our seed. But it's really just like step by step. It's not as daunting, I think, as you think it is.
Awesome. I'm Morgan DeBond, CEO of Blavity. We're a media company for Black millennials. So we have 5 brands, which I won't name, but they're lots of fun. And my journey is similar to you guys. So I started actually at Intuit working as a product manager. So I was learning a lot in San Francisco. So I was learning a lot about how do you create products, how do you launch things. And what was interesting was that no one was applying those practices of design thinking to young Black people in the United States, despite the fact that Black creators influence so much of culture. They make the best content on Twitter. Like, what is Twitter without Black folks? Right. YouTube, Instagram, right? And so Blavity is a space for Black creators to find themselves, to connect with other people, whether that's through conferences, through our websites.
Hey, I'm Katarina Schneider, and I'm the founder and CEO of Ritual. I started Ritual about 2 years ago. I was 4 months pregnant, just as I am now. I was working at the same company, actually, as Susie, running Troy Carter's fund, investing in startups. As similar to Angela, cushy life in some ways, and had no real desire to leave and start my own business. But then got pregnant, started caring more than ever what I was putting in and on my body. Everything from deodorant to toothpaste, and then started to look at my vitamins with fresh eyes and realized that they contain those same harmful ingredients that I was avoiding throughout the house. $36 billion industry, 1 out of 2 US adults are taking vitamins every day, and yet most people are super confused, and the industry is full of pseudoscience. And so raised our first round, just over $1 million, while I was pregnant with an idea. Knew that I had to be the one to change this massive industry because I was so committed and passionate, and also very skeptical. And we've raised about $16 million to date. We've been live for a year, and it's been growing pretty fast. So.
Awesome. And I'm Sarah. I'm the founder and CEO of Pro Day, that the LA Dodgers, pour out a little, are investors in. And I started the company about 2 years ago. We're the most diverse sports media company in the world. And our tagline is, we don't stick to sports, because we are very, very, very interested in your favorite athletes' travel and fitness and nutrition. Did you know that Tom Brady thinks that water makes you resistant to sunburn? Like, there's a lot of crazy stuff out there that we're sharing with the world with no judgment. So we started about 2 years ago, and I've gotten to know all these. It's insane. It doesn't work, right? So that's what we do. So we're just going to kind of jump in. Everybody gave us a really good overview of what you do. What's the best part and what's the worst part of running your own company? Like, compared to sort of having the corporate job or having, a freelance or consulting or anything else. Like, what's the best and worst part of it? Like, I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, the buck stops here. Yay and terrible.
Round table.
I can start.
Yeah.
I think for us, and for me personally, it's that everything's always your fault. Like, that's the worst part. So if it's like, oh man, you guys are walking in at 9:45 every day, like, who set that culture? Like, it's probably because I was walking in a little bit later than I used to do. Or like, the sink is broken. Whose fault is that, right? So everything, ultimately, whether it's performance of the company, whether it's things like office management, at the end of the day, is your responsibility. And I think that's been difficult for me, just like being reflective on, okay, I need to take responsibility for these things as well. The best part is that you're your own boss, right? And that creates a lot of space for creativity. No one can really tell you no when it's yours. And so that's been really kind of freeing for me.
Yeah, I'd say that the worst part is sort of yourself. Like, I think it triggers every insecurity that you have. So I find myself, as the company has grown, we're now 150 people. But when like every day that I work at this company, it's the biggest company I've ever worked for because I've never had a job. So, there's every step of the way, it's like, oh yeah, like I feel, you have days where you're like, I'm so good at my job. I can recruit the best talent, like we are growing. And then the very next day, someone will come to you with a problem and you're like, I am the worst person at this job. How did this happen? How do we lose that candidate? How did our growth tank this month? And my happiness, if you could draw a line of my happiness and our revenues, they used to be the exact same line. And that's really, really dangerous. Because no company, I mean, you can talk about the unicorns of Silicon Valley, but no company is fully a growth trajectory. If you zoom in, there are tons of up and down lines, and for the most part, it's down lines and failure. So I think it's just like this practice of constantly assessing yourself and not letting your insecurities overtake you. So that's like the worst part. It's also kind of the best part because you're constantly growing and challenging yourself. But I would say that the best part is building, instead of being part of the rat race and playing by everybody else's rules, you build your own game, right? Going into a company and trying to influence diversity at the company level when your managers don't get it, when the leadership team doesn't get it, is really difficult. But here, you actually build what the managers and leadership team care about. So for us, we call Choose a love company. And so much of that, like that's weird by tech standards. People are like, what are you doing? And it's like, I'm a woman, right? Like I actually care about being emotionally intelligent at work. And now all my managers care about that. Our executive team is 50% women. Like there is a whole game that we have built instead of trying to play other people's game. And our goal is to show that it can work. And because of it, we have open salaries at the company. Like, I built that myself. So everyone has transparent salaries, and men and women are paid at equal levels for their same experience levels. But like, you can't really do that as much if you're trying to influence at another company, or it takes decades to build up to be a VP at that company where you even have that level of influence. I think it's the best part.
Do you guys have any best, worst?
Sure, if you want it from everybody. Yeah, I guess, to echo that in a little bit, like I think the worst is always yourself. There's so much on you every day. It's like I always say, it's like a death by 1,000 decisions. Like if you saw a stapler on a desk somewhere else, you would never think about it. Like now you're like, I actually had to choose that stapler. Like I was like, that was me. And so it's like you have to make so many decisions throughout the day that but it's like exhaustion from that, just like analysis paralysis. So I think at the end of the day, like if you look over your day and how things went, sometimes it feels like you didn't get to where you wanted to be because of so many other decisions, underneath you or otherwise. And so where did that come from? Like, did I not have enough team support to do those things? It's always, like, at the end, it was me that didn't make that happen. And in the same way, the best is me again. Like, you actually growing. And I think culture setting, knowing, like, what you want to be out in the world, and that's true from a product side. Like the reason why we all started something is like really wanted something to be out in the world. And so you get to do that in all facets of your life. So now it's like, I want this product to be in the world, but I also want this culture to be out there in the world and this way of thinking to be out in the world. And like, you get to influence all of those things. And sometimes that is overwhelming, or it doesn't turn out the way you thought it was. Like I thought mandating morning yoga was gonna be great. Yeah. Turns out people are uncomfortable. but like it's, but like at least you feel like there's a culture that you're trying to build and you're trying to stick by that. And so in some ways I feel like that's great because we're just growing through it and you're trying to put this out in the world and see how the effect it has on the people around you and the company. And like, you're really trying to make everybody their best self at the end of the day, and that's really empowering. Because I don't think everyone that's going to work for me is going to work for me forever. Like I full-heartedly assume that you're probably going to leave and go do something else, but by the end of you working for me, I want you to have loved your job, like gained a lot of skills, and like loved your experience, and like that I think makes for a better ecosystem. So I think we get to be a part of that, which I love.
It's like building your own PayPal mafia without the evil.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to it too. I think the highs are incredibly high and the lows are lower than anything, and that is just entrepreneurship, and that goes on every single day, and you're kind of in control of your own destiny. And so I wouldn't trade it for the world, having worked in a lot of corporate environments, because knowing that you're building companies that are changing people's lives, and you can see that every day, even if you're faced with hardships and different things, there's nothing better.
My dad always likes to say when you ask him how he is that he's unbelievable. And later he's like, I didn't say if I was unbelievably good or unbelievably bad. And I feel like that is startup life in a nutshell, because it's always something. So because this is a women's conference, and because we're the first panel, and because I'm a little bit basic, we're gonna do the questions. So we're gonna talk about being women. We're gonna talk about being not white. We're gonna talk about being moms if you have kids, or being married, or being really single, and if you keep getting dumped, and maybe that's just me. So we're gonna talk about it. If you guys know anybody, send them my way. So, we're going to talk about it because this is relevant to our lives, even though sometimes, I will not use the B word, but we're going to talk about it, okay? So, tell me, pregnant lady. You had a career before this, you were working with startups, you were, is there a thing? Does being pregnant make it harder or easier? Does being a mom make it, some women are like, now I can focus so much more. Other women, and then there's also this cultural narrative of how can you run a company? You have a baby inside of you.
Yeah, in the beginning it was, I would say, probably more difficult to raise our initial seed round, being pregnant and going into a room full of, Silicon Valley investors, and convincing them that I was still going to be who I am after I gave birth, and then I was still going to be committed to running and building a $1 billion+ company. And many things were said, I'm not going to repeat them, but that part was challenging. But I think kind of adversity makes you stronger in a lot of ways, and then once the kid comes, it's so much harder than actually being pregnant. And you learn to, as Angela knows, you learn to really kind of optimize your life and accept help where you can get it. And I was so scared of, having a nanny for my whole life because I didn't grow up with one, and now she's part of the family and lives with us. And there's no other way that I could see myself being fully dedicated to my business. So I think help is everything. Yeah. And in the company as well.
Any other moms?
Yeah, I can echo that. I totally agree with everything she said. So I also raised when I was pregnant. I remember doing a spreadsheet while I was in labor. Because it was my second, so I was like, been there before. I got a few hours, it's gonna be fine. I'll turn this out. But it is weird. The questions are weird. They're like, it's almost like, how much did you sacrifice to get here that proves a little bit that you're not going to go home and stay home in a way? Like knowing that you flew and you're pumping in the car and all these things, to them are signals you're not going to not work, which is terribly misogynistic. It's I can do anything I want. You know what I mean? You have no idea, but it's these signals that they're looking for to prove that you're still going to kill it, like you said. But and then when the baby comes, it's just so much harder. And I think that I've been open about this forever. Again, why I started the company. I think people need to learn to accept help way more than they do, particularly women. I think women, for the most of their lives, if you're successful, it's oftentimes because you put your head down and you did all the work. And so you feel like it was merit-based and I got there. So I was a math major, I was the only girl. So I was but it was merit-based. And so then when you get to an age when you realize that's actually the white man's game. Do you know what I mean? They're making you feel that way, because they don't do everything merit-based. They get lots of friends helping them out, helping them with promotions, introductions to people, and they're making you play that game. So if you turn that around, you're like, I also want help. I also need a network of people, and that's what's going to make me successful. It's not if I work until I bleed. you know, and I think, you know, but having a kid like force functions you to get there, because you're like, either you will do this alone and blood, sweat, and tears, or you're going to accept help. And I think that experience really opened me up to really wanting more help, seeing that also apply in the workplace. Like, the network you build really is important, and I say that to everyone that wants to start a company. Like, it's, as a woman, men have a million opportunities to build a network. Literally, like, it's like the CEO will go out to baseball, Dodgers, like with an intern because they bond over baseball. But like, women don't do that. Like, we don't like go shopping together or a movie, because everything has a signal. You know, like, what are you gonna go shopping for? Like, what movie are we watching? And so we're all like so timid about like, what are we gonna do on this outing? You know, but you should just do it. Like, try to build your network, find a mentor, find people around you, because that help is built in for a white male, and it's not for women. So, and not women of color. So, like, get there, do that. But I think having a child really force functions you to realize, like, it took a village. And as Hillary Rodham said. But yeah.
So, non-moms maybe, but also non-white dudes. How's that going?
Yeah, this is a hard one, because when I was raising our Series A, I like chopped off all my hair, and I was like, all right, like, I'm gonna be androgynous, you know, like I've been through all the cycles of like, it's like they'll never know, you know. Never know. Yeah, whatever. And I remember when I was fundraising, there was one investor, and we were so excited. We went through the phases of diligence where he was digging into the company. He spoke to customers. He's supposed to meet us that day. He calls me up and he says, "Hey Tracy, I spoke to your customers. They say it's one of the best, your service is one of the best things that's happened to them at work. Unfortunately, we can't invest." And I was like, oh man, like, you were supposed to come in and meet the team. And he's like, listen, we don't have the conviction in the team to the actual conviction to deal with this industry. It's going to be a really hard slog. And really, you're not out for blood. And I thanked him for his very candid feedback, because I think probably 90% of investors thought that but never told me. They just said, oh, the market's not big enough, you know, it's too competitive. So he told me, so I thanked him, I hung up, and I cried for like a day. I just like lay down on the ground and I just bawled my eyes out. And I kind of emerged from that, and I was questioning myself. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing in a venture capital driven industry where I'm a woman and I don't have the confidence of a man? And I sort of, and confidence, I should say, looks different to me for others, which I'll talk about in a second. And I came away from that and I emailed him and I was like, you are totally right. Like, I am not out for blood. And like, our culture is about being out for love, and that's why we're gonna win this industry. And I came back from that totally transformed. And that's when we really embraced me being like a woman and us being a love company. And it changed my outlook, and it's something I've embraced ever since. Instead of like shied away from or tried to mitigate or like tried to cut my hair, right? And I still struggle with it. I spoke to a female founder yesterday who's fundraising. I like to mentor female founders. So anyone who's like fundraising and stuff, I'm super happy to chat with you, because I'm really passionate about this. And she's like, you know, people tell me I don't sound confident. And I got the same feedback from my guy friends who, God bless them, like, they're trying to help me. And I'm super excited, and they go, you just don't sound very confident. And I was like, I feel really confident. They're like, you don't sound it. And they're like, you gotta, you know, if someone asks you a question, no pause, say the answer like you know it back and forth, even if you don't. And I was like, well, that's not very authentic for me, you know? So I still struggle with that. I think in the confines of the company, like, I've cried in front of the company. The company's seen me cry. We've seen other people at the company cry. We talk about our emotions. Like, I feel very safe in myself. But it is a struggle when I fundraise. It's a struggle a little more externally. I think the world is becoming a lot friendlier to seeing a woman at like a founder conference, right? So I think that this is a great time to be a female founder, but it's still hard.
Yeah, so my experience is similar. So when I first fundraised, I failed miserably because I emotionally was not ready for the pain that you go through getting rejected for something that you've worked hours and hours and put all your money into. And I made the mistake in the beginning to just raising from Black VCs. And I was like, I have a Black company, I've got a Black team, it's a Black product, like, they'll get it. Wrong. They didn't get it. They all passed, and they passed in a way that was really difficult for me because they said, like, we love you, we love the idea, let me coach you, right? So everyone wants to give you advice, but nobody wants to write a check. And I'm like, I don't need coaching, I need a check, right? Like, I can get coaching from everywhere else, but I can't get a check from everywhere else. And so I went back into my huddle and I said, okay, if I'm gonna do this business, I'm gonna do it in a way that I don't need to raise venture capital. I've raised venture capital. I've raised, $2 million plus, but the point was that I needed to create a world in which, like, I knew that my company would still exist, even if other people weren't going to give me the permission to exist. And so we have a diversity of business models now, which makes us, because of the diversity, just like so much stronger. And so now our metrics are insane. And they're like, how is this possible with like this little money? And I'm like, because we just hustled. We hustled harder. And so that was my experience, That was 3 years ago, so we're okay now, but.
Yeah. Co-sign to all of that is tough out there. So you just heard all the reasons why it's kind of weird and terrible, and people are like, oh, you're not nursing your baby while you're out for blood in the car. But say that you still want to do startups. It's great. Innovation. So if you want to, what would you tell everybody here who's sort of looking at it? And one thing Susie and I were talking about in prep for this panel is that it's not just, okay, you have to go launch a company, right? Maybe like, I don't know, I always like to say, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way at all because I love fashion, every Birkin you have, that could have been a seed check or an angel check, you know what I mean? Like for real, especially with tax because those things are expensive. So, you might love your job, or you might be retired, you might be independently wealthy, you might be whatever. So maybe you want to be an angel investor, maybe you want to advise startups, maybe you want to mentor, maybe you want to work at a startup, maybe you want to start a company, maybe you don't know what you want to do, but you're here when you don't have to be here, and so you're clearly interested in something about entrepreneurship, right? And so taking that sort of whole panoply when you're in that kind of process of, and also you generally end up doing it all, right? You're a startup founder who's mentoring people and who will eventually be a billionaire who will invest in people, I hope, particularly women of color. I think it's your duty. No pressure, and so you go through all these different steps, right? You and I both used to be investors, used to be in finance, and now we're running companies. So once you get into the startup world, it's sort of like a gang, like you can't really get out. You just sort of move around in it. So with all of that being said, what is your advice to people who are sort of right on that precipice on the outside, still at a corporate job, and they just want to get in somehow? Like, where do you start if you don't like have the idea and you're not like, you don't have that seed funding?
I can start, but I think I mentor a lot of female founders as well, and one of the things that, just going back to also the female-male thing, a lot of them that men don't do is tell me that they need a co-founder. That they can't start a company unless they have a co-founder. And I think that's crap. And I think if you really believe in something and you feel like you're the person to change it and you want to commit your life to it, you don't need somebody to help you do that. You can do it on your own. You can hire the right people. And I think that ultimately gives a lot of women strength to start their own business. And I think that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah, I'd say that it's funny because I think I'm still stuck on the man and woman thing, but the story that you have going into a room and not being confident enough. I've also heard the converse of people walk in the room and just kill it, they kill it in the room, and it's interesting to know that as a woman, to hear the stories of other women out there and where am I on that spectrum? Do you know what I mean? So, and I say that because I think that if you are a woman and you are wanting to be an entrepreneur, I think it's really great to talk to people about what that means. Where do you fit on that spectrum, and how do you own what that is? And so because fundraising is a full-time job. It is kissing a lot of frogs and trying to really find that perfect match, even if you're lucky. It's just, you still have to do that. And so I think it's really important to like find people that are other entrepreneurs that have gone through that. I think it was really like we didn't do that, and you know it was like eye-opening the first time. But I think, and most people I know that are entrepreneurs, like I personally also like invite anyone that's a woman that entrepreneur that wants to be one. Like we do these dinners. Like I think it's a community that you should build. So I think most women in this space, it is like a gang. So come on, join, jump in. But if it's not what you want to do, like you're not an entrepreneur, but you like the space, I feel like that, hey, everyone's looking for help, you know? So like if somebody wants to mentor or be an advisor or angel invest, there's tons of people, like tons of kids, tons of like everybody that just wants help. And like, so I think that's actually an easy place and very welcome place. So.
Yeah, if you show up, we'll put you to work. It'll be jarring baby food. So we're all LA based, right? I am like half the time, but
I'm
that's
up in
a lot for me.
SF, but we have an LA office, and I'm from LA.
You're from LA, you're long LA. So the mayor's office was up here before, and obviously LA has seen a huge shift towards technology with Snapchat, but then also a bunch of other awesome startups like all of ours and companies. Do you think that LA is a good place to start a company, maybe particularly for women, maybe just in general, versus Silicon Valley, New York, Botswana? Like, what do you think?
I really, really wanted to build the company in LA, like the headquarters. This was, again, like 7 years ago. And I couldn't raise money out here. Like, I couldn't raise a dime. I was out there, like, begging for money out in Santa Monica. And no one would invest, you know? And then I got into 500 startups, moved up to San Francisco, and 5 months later, like, raised $1 million. You know, so like, I think, but from what I've heard of all accounts down here is that the industry has really changed down here. I'm gonna link it a little bit to your last question too, in that I think that the way to make this city, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity to build a great technology company or any company in this city. Like the thing that this city has that San Francisco doesn't is it has a lot more diversity because it's just a lot bigger, like 8 million versus 700,000 up there, right? And so I think there's a ton of opportunity here. One thing that I did is when I got into 500 Startups, which is an accelerator program up in San Francisco, I spoke to 17 founders in my first 2 weeks. And I hopped on a call with them. I was like, I'll take 15 minutes, I'll grab coffee, I'll buy you dinner, whatever. And I just started building very real connections. Like I find that some of the networking is very inauthentic, but if you can do it in an authentic way, I would, grab 2 or 3 contact information from people here in this room and ask them for 1 to 2 introductions to people in the industry that you want to be in, or at the role that you want to be in, if you want to be an investor, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to work in tech. Because chances are between all of us, we know someone that's going to be a great person for you to have in your life. And I found that some of my best connections have just been, a friend saying, you got to meet this person, right? Like my friend Jessica Ma, who's standing right there, she's a great female founder from Indanero. She's awesome. I met her, she was one of the first people I met in San Francisco. She has opened me up to so many different people because we care about each other, because of our friendship. And so I think sometimes networking is actually it has a masculine feel to it, or like a formal feel. And I don't mean that in a bad way, guys. I just mean that in terms of it feels very it can feel out of reach for me and inauthentic. But when I frame it as I'm here to build friendships and build connection, all of a sudden the world opens up to me. All of a sudden you're not just a face of business cards. You're all really human. You're humans, and you have heartbeats, and you have pains and joys in your life. And so I think meeting with people here and asking people for those connections, you can build, I think, a great company here in Los Angeles.
Wait, I have a really good idea. Okay, everyone, turn to somebody that you do not know and point to them, literally point, and be like, we're gonna talk later. Do it right now. We're gonna talk later. Who's gonna talk later? Yeah, and then you have to do it. Because it's weird if you don't.
You're right.
Okay. Everybody has somebody they didn't already know to talk to later? Good. You better talk later. Okay. Well, what about the rest of you guys? Why are you long on LA?
I would echo the diversity thing. I mean, I think San Francisco, there was no way I was going to be able to recruit people from the East Coast to move to San Francisco. Like, they just weren't going to do it. Like, people weren't going to leave New York and DC and Atlanta to move to SF. And then the prices here are much more reasonable. Like, we can get a 6,500 square foot office here for half the price than it would be in San Francisco, which just gives you more flexibility as you're building an early stage startup. And so those two factors were the biggest thing for me, the diversity, being able to recruit and move talent from other places in the country to a city where they're like, I could spend 5 years in LA, like everybody can spend 5 years in LA. And then the price, it was affordable.
We got in time? What are you telling me?
We're done.
Okay, we're wrapping up. I only have like 2 more questions. Okay. Anybody else want to rep for LA? Would anybody take the other stance and say you shouldn't be in LA? That there's a reason to go elsewhere? Cool. We're along LA. It's very on brand. Okay, so we are being told very politely to wrap it up. So just really quickly, is there any last thing, and you don't have to have one, a piece of career advice or something you want everybody to know about being a founder in 2017?
I know that culture is a big part of what I think the discussions are going to be here and just generally. And I think before you actually build a company or join a company, whether it's corporate America or not, I think it's a good idea to do a values exercise and roadmap for yourself. Like and the way that I've done it before is imagine 3 people in your life who you really, really look up to, who you admire, identify 2 to 3 qualities about them that you love, and then boil that down into like, oh, here are the themes. I really care about integrity. I care about passion. I care about community. And like write those out for yourself, and then find a company or build a company around those values. Because then you are an embodiment of the values that you actually believe in.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.